Hi everyone, and welcome to Jane Talks Murder, where I'll be talking about and reviewing an episode of Poirot, Murder, She Wrote, Diagnosis Murder, or Jonathan Creek. Today I'm looking at Poirot, The Mystery of the Spanish Chest, or as I like to call it, that time it was all fun and games until someone lost an eye. We begin the episode with some weird-ass pink fencing thing, where things seem to have escalated over a joke. This fence is on for some time, until this guy gets slashed across the face. And then opera! Attended by Poirot and Hastings, who are spied on by this woman. Poirot enjoys the opera because of all the murder, before he's approached by peeping Lady Chatterton, who he recognises from a previous case. She wants to hire Poirot because her friend Mrs. Clayton is in danger, so he agrees to swing by the next day. Lady Chatterton, who, full disclosure, I'm going to call Chat from now on, says the opening fencing guys were fighting over Margurite Clayton, and straight up says her husband is jank.
She could have married anybody.
How white does this lady's makeup need to be? Chat fears Marguerite is in an abusive relationship and thinks Edward is going to murder her, and she may be right because he's off knife shopping. Marguerite hides the letter she was writing when Edward comes home, but he says he's not able to go to the party at some dudes called Major Rich's, and instead packs for a business trip to Scotland. He has second thoughts when he talks to Curtis, the face/dude, but he encourages him to do it, whatever it happens to be. Edward goes to see Major Rich, who isn't home, and shoos the butler so he can nose around the house. And then Curtis tells Major Rich to stop sex-pesting Marguerite, and this guy is an odd mix of Freddie Mercury and John Cleese. Major Rich comes home, but Edward is gone, which confuses the butler who didn't hear him leave. While Hastings whines that he has to deal with the paperwork because Miss Lemon is away, and Poirot heads for the party. Chat and Poirot arrive, but can't see Edward, and Poirot is not impressed that Major Rich doesn't know who he is. Never mind, let's get sloshed. Everyone dances while Curtis stands around shiftily, and then the important characters have a chat about Edward, before Poirot's head fades into a record. Curtis holds Marguerite's chin up with his finger, Major Rich looks constipated, and these two randos have a nice dance before Chat forces Poirot to dance too, which is something. Please focus on this chest now. The next day, Poirot is pissed that Hastings can't make tisane properly when Jap comes to visit, seeing as Poirot is a witness to Edward Clayton's murder, which Major Rich has been arrested for and his body found in the Spanish chest.
He'd been stabbed through the eye, straight into the brain.
Poirot is shooketh, although he thinks it's dumb that Major Rich would kill Edward, stuff him in a chest, and then have a party in the same room, so decides he can't be the killer. Major Rich aggressively tells Poirot he's innocent, both of the murder and an affair with Marguerite, so Poirot visits Curtis. What is blowing this guy's hair? Wow, Curtis is super backlit and says that Major Rich is innocent and also denies any affair. Except Marguerite goes to visit Major Rich, wants to be left alone with him and acts real shifty, so Rich encourages her to tell the truth and she sods off. Poirot goes back to Major Rich's and pokes around, noticing a hole in the chest, and then pieces out. What's with these lingering shots? Is this a Paranormal Activity movie all of a sudden? Marguerite downs a load of pills, and then we get the greatest line delivery ever.
Oh, quick, gentlemen, please help me. Something terrible has happened.
Hastings busts down the bathroom door, luckily in time, so they question Marguerite, and she says she prayed for her husband's death, and thinks Major Rich might have taken that a bit too literally. Poirot is still convinced that he's innocent, otherwise he would have gotten rid of the body in the night, but then leaves the delicious-looking dessert to go and see Jap, to ask what was in the dead guy's pockets. Turns out there was a drill bit in there, which Poirot was expecting, and a phone call from Hastings confirms his suspicions.
Chief Inspector Jap, I must ask you to trust me as you have never trusted me before.
Here we go.
Jap publicly arrests Marguerite and Rich is released, which earns Poirot a late-night phone call telling him he's arrested the wrong person and to meet at the fencing gym. When? Now? Tomorrow? Poirot wanders around in the dark before being floodlit in the face and yelled at by Curtis, but Poirot claps back and tells him exactly how he committed the crime. Curtis convinced Edward that Marguerite was having an affair and to spy on them, so when he went to Major Rich's house, he climbed into the Spanish chest and drilled a peephole that Curtis could stab him through and frame Major Rich, getting rid of both love rivals in one go. With Curtis about to stab him, Poirot suggests he fenced Major Rich, and they get into it, with Rich coming out on top and dramatically unmasking himself, like it wasn't completely obvious that it was him. I really liked this episode. It's reminiscent of Jonathan Creek to me in its style of murder, and I remember being quite freaked out when I first watched it. It's just under an hour long, the ideal length for these kinds of mysteries, and it didn't throw a kitchen sink full of characters at you like the previous episode I looked at, Evil Under the Sun. The killer could only really be Curtis or Rich, but the mystery of how was what appealed to me. They set up the mystery really well, with the conversation between Curtis and Edward, as well as the butler not hearing Edward leave again. And honestly, I feel a little sorry for Edward, who was so easily manipulated because he was so desperate for answers. Although I'm still not sure if Marguerite and John were having an affair or not. The murder itself was really clever, as the victim was able to be murdered in a room full of party guests without any of them, including Poirot, seeing it happen, or knowing the body was even there. It was a nice misdirect having Poirot be hired by Chat because she thought Edward was going to murder Marguerite, only for Edward himself to wind up dead. But the whole fencing subplot was a little silly to me. I know it set up a motive for Curtis, but it was a bit over the top and gave away he was the killer very quickly. And yet they still framed it as if it was a mystery, when absolutely any bladed weapon could have been used to stab Edward. It didn't have to be fencing related. We have one victim, Edward Clayton, who was so desperate to know if his wife was cheating on him that he let himself get stabbed in the eye by our killer, Colonel Curtis, who was driven by the oldest motive in the book, love, but took it one step further and tried to frame Major Rich. So there you have it. That was The Mystery of the Spanish Chest. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or come say hi on social media. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button, it really does mean a lot, or consider subscribing if you want more videos like this one. Alternatively, feel free to check out my other YouTube channels, Jane Talks Real, Jane Talks Trek, and Jane Plays Games Badly. Thank you so much for watching, I'll speak to you soon, and keep an eye out for clues.